What's up, everybody? James Attaway here. Today, I've got with me Justin Rizzo. He's a worship leader, songwriter, and a worship leader coach. And I wanted to pick his brain on how he interfaces and deals with sound techs, how he brings them on, and creates a relational environment that really works together to create a good creative community. And that's one of the things he's really known for. And he's had big teams and small teams and led solo sets and had a huge band. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But Justin, welcome to the Attaway Audio YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's an honor, such an honor to be here.
Cool. So how did you get started with worship leading? What's your story? How'd you begin? Kind of walk us through the start of Justin Rizzo as a worship leader.
Yeah, so I grew up pastor's kid. Both my parents were worship leaders. And my dad started to teach me the guitar when I was 12. And from there, it's kind of really got a love for music and led throughout high school at my dad's church, and then moved to the International House of Prayer when I was 18 in Kansas City, and have been on staff here for the past 18 years.
18 years.
18 years.
That's almost 2 decades, everybody. So how much of that time have you been worship leading? How much time have you had a team? What's been your kind of role throughout those 18 years?
Yeah, so pretty much right when I got here, I did one of the internships here, and then I joined full-time staff. So I led a full-time team for the first 15 years, which full-time staff here at the House of Prayer, as a worship leader, you're doing 12 hours a week, so 6 2-hour sets, as well as traveling and different things like that. So did that for the first 15 years, and then just recently here, kind of stepped out to do more worship leader coaching, continue to do a bunch of songwriting, and then also have a production company where we produce musicals, and now recently also getting into the film world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're pretty busy.
Pretty busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Very cool. So tell me about what it's like, in those 15 years of full-time worship leading. There's many people that come and go on worship teams. It's the nature of being a missions base. You don't have a static person that you hire and they're, on there, for 10 years at a time. Yeah. So you've had a bunch of different sound techs come on your team. What are some things that you've learned about bringing them on, about making sure that they make that transition to be a good fit for your team? You're communicating the values, the vision of your team, how you want it to sound. Walk us through some of that process that you have when bringing on a new sound tech.
Great question. It's one that I did not do well in the early years of leading. It was just kind of like if you could breathe and you knew what a couple of little knobs meant, you're on the team. But I think probably the biggest thing that I began to really pay attention to, yes, is talent, that you know what you're doing. But secondly, and probably more importantly, is that humility in their personal connection with Jesus. I'm not sure if this is just my vantage point. You would know this a lot better than me, but it seems like sound techs can sometimes be that like the outcasts, where it's like they're in the back of the room, they're never seen, they're kind of like sometimes perceived as the quirky person. You only notice them when something goes wrong, there's feedback or whatever. And so, but what I began to realize and discover was as I began to pursue friendship with these people as they were, auditioning for the team or trialing on the team, I really began to discover like they need community, and their connection to Jesus is one of the most important things beyond being incredibly skilled.
Talk to me about what you're looking for in an audition process. So not everybody that just says, hey, I can run sound, is really a good fit for the job. What are some of the things that you're listening for? What are some of the things that you're looking for in communication and skills that make somebody stand out from 3 or 4 other people? Who would you promote, if you had a team of sound techs that were going, who would you kind of promote to a leadership position, say this is what I want repeated amongst the rest of the worship team, amongst the rest of the sound techs on the worship team? Talk to me about what are the things that stand out to you as this is what I want in a sound tech?
I mean, again, before we even talk about the skill, which is so important, especially if we're talking about a leadership position, which, the sound tech on a team that's a very high up leadership position, in my opinion, because without them, nothing that we do really matters. It won't be heard. And also the opinion of that sound tech matters a whole lot to the team. They probably have the closest view of anyone on the team of weaknesses. They can solo a singer. They can listen to every single flaw in the voice. They can hear the snare drum and how horrible it's tuned or whatever it is. and pass judgments really, really quick on the entire team. So I think before we get even to the talent discussion, for me, it's like, is there that humility in their heart? Do they have people skills to, communicate all this like sometimes negative, really intense information that they're finding out about my team? Do they have the people skills to communicate that in a spirit of love? And do they have humility to be in a constant conversation with me as the worship leader? I've worked with techs before where there was no room for conversation. And this is a lot in my early days before I really actually knew how to get in a conversation with someone before they were on the team. And that's never a place you want to be, where it's like, I can't talk to my sound tech or with anyone. You don't want to be a part of a team where there's, shun. It's like walls are up where you cannot, conversate or whatever. So I think that whole relationship, humility, discussion is kind of like the first thing that I'm really looking for in a sound tech. But then, I think in this day and age with the world of streaming, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, that's probably one of the first things that I ask a sound tech is like, hey, send me the mixes of a Facebook Live that you've done. Like send me a link of 5 or 10 things that you've done so I can assess, how your ear is, the equipment that you've worked with in the past versus the equipment that we have here at our church. And then also, I think I'm a big proponent of asking other people in the room who are in my sets, whose ear I trust, for feedback on my tech. And they know that I'm asking for that. I think that's something that is also really, really valuable that I'm looking for.
You mentioned something about hearing people's weaknesses and being able to respond to them in a positive way or in a healthy way. Talk to me about that time when maybe you've got a singer on your team that either they're having a bad day or their pitch just isn't hitting the center of the note that day. And, barring having, live tuning, which I'm a big fan of, but is not necessary. How do you approach that conversation to keep it honoring, to keep it respectful, but also knowing that the mix needs to not be distracting? Like, how do you make that known to the sound tech? How do you let the sound tech know that you're talking to the singer? Like, tell me about that situation when there's some weakness that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, totally. Let's address the weakness. If I've come to a place of trust of that sound tech in their maturity and their humility to be able to talk to singer X on their own, to me, that's the ideal. I don't always have to have it like, you come tell me, I come tell Sally, hey, you got to work on your pitch, right? So, but if that's not there, where I can trust them to do it on their own, and sometimes I would be a part of those conversations. Typically it would happen in more of a fluid type of way, because this is my big thing with singers. When I work with singers, is like, if I text or email a singer or say, hey, can I talk to you after the set or whatever, immediately all the negative things, typically all the negative things I could possibly say to them are going to flood. Like, oh my gosh, is he firing me? Is he going to rebuke me? What have I done wrong, right? Whereas if you make something in passing, it's not going to be that big of a deal. So if it's like the tech, especially, I think the best way it could happen is like, hey, wanted to mention to you, I think there was a little bit of, issue here, not a big deal. And you're like on your way out the door. That might still sting a little bit, but it's not this like premeditated, the sound tech and the worship leader hate me. They've been listening to me for months. I've been pitchy. How long have I been pitchy? And then they go back and check every single Facebook Live for the past 10 years, So, making it as low-key as possible, I think is also helpful. If they can do it on their own, awesome. If we do it together, great. But if it's at a place where I wouldn't trust that person's discipleship aura to talk to Sally, then I would just say, come tell me. And honestly, James, if that's not in the wheelhouse discussion between a worship leader and a sound tech, I think it needs to be like today. Because if I don't trust that you're looking out for my best interests as the worship leader of the team, and you don't trust that I care about your opinion, then we have some real challenges, and we need to probably go to therapy for a couple of months to get that taken care of.
This episode is brought to you by Sound Tech Worship Leader Therapy. You can sign up at www.urldoesnotexist.com. Thank you. I mentioned this earlier where you've had seasons where you've had a much bigger band. Can you tell us more about what that season was like and the instrumentation you had and kind of the journey you were going on musically and how the sound tech played a big role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. The order and the demand on my sound tech in that season, I had about a 3-year season where I had violins and horns and all those different sorts of things, percussion. the demand on him went way up. They did a phenomenal job. And you teched for me several times in that season as well. And a couple other guys, you just did fantastic. But yeah, I had a season of my worship leading career where I really began to dabble in some of the strings and composing and horns. And honestly, the Lord just began bringing these people. Like I wasn't seeking them out. They just kind of like began to come, and they were like super talented and a lot of them super anointed. And I was like, yeah, let's do. So Saturday morning at 8 a.m. was kind of our strings and things set. And I remember so many Saturdays, texting my tech of like, hey, we've got 2 additional violins today, like a half hour before the set, and kind of hearing, graciousness for the most part. They were so gracious, texting him back like, okay, we'll make it work, and then showing up and realizing like, okay, we have to have like singers not sing because we don't have enough channels, or we had to do this with the microphone or whatever. It was one of the most enjoyable seasons of my career as a worship leader, and probably one of the most stressful, but it's kind of the way life is, right? Sometimes the stress and the joy are kind of mumbled together there.
Talk to me about how you ask a sound tech for something, because in that context, it's not like you can say, hey, listen to this CD ahead of time. I'm dating myself, CDs. Listen to this track ahead of time because we're gonna do this kind of arrangement. A lot of this was made up on the fly.
Yeah.
You didn't know necessarily from the recording, because there was no recording, what the most important mix elements were. Talk to me about how, mid-flight, in the middle of a 2-hour worship set, how did you give direction not only to your strings players, but also to your sound tech to know, like, this is what needs to be highlighted right now. The hi-hat is not everything right now.
Yeah.
We need to think about, this other instrument.
Turn the hi-hat off. Yeah, so me, and I'm not sure, I've never actually asked you this, so this might be like a truth time here, live on this video. But I'm really big on like communication with the sound tech mid-flight during a 2-hour set. Now, if we're at a conference or a 45-minute Sunday morning session or whatever, I'm probably gonna trust that we're doing rock music with a 5-piece band and 2 singers, and I was gonna say it's pretty hard to mess that up. It's not actually, but you can mess that up. But compared to the Saturday morning set with 12 extra instruments, right? So I would just like flag them down. I had different like kind of hand signals that I would use of like, it's violin time, like I don't want the singers on, I don't want the keyboard on, I don't want the electric guitar doing anything. This is the violin time. And I still want it pushing like 80, 85 dBs, like just washing over people in the room. And so I would just have that kind of hand communication, or we have like the panic button or the talkback mic that, again, sometimes my tech probably hated it, but I was just gonna talk to them in their ear and be like, hey, we're gonna do this, be ready for it type of thing.
The talkback mic was both a gift and a challenge.
Tell us, James.
Because often, I subbed a handful of times on this giant team, and it's enormous. And on occasion, this extremely large band would be at a 6 a.m. intercession prayer meeting. So you're getting there at 5:30 for briefing, and you start transitioning at 5:50 in the morning. And I remember in a debriefing one time after, they're like, James, how'd it go? This is a big band to try to mix. It's kind of like eating really, really spicy habanero salsa first thing in the morning. It's good, it's just pretty intense for right after you wake up. Often you're scrambling. You're trying to get this channel worked out here, you're trying to get this person's monitor mix fixed over here. There's a lot going on at once, and then somebody stands up and they want to pray on the microphone. So there's a lot to juggle, and then it's like, oh yeah, I want to talk to you too.
Yeah.
The talkback, was very helpful, but it was another thing to balance in the midst of balancing a whole lot of things at once. So
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for all those times.
There's a proverb, I think it's in Proverbs 14, it says, where there is no ox, the stable is clean, but much profit comes from an ox, right? So basically, if you want to have profit, you're gonna have to clean out the stable and deal with some malarkey. And the sound system and instruments are kind of the same way. It's way easy to do an event if you've got no instruments, if you've got no band, but you can get a whole lot of emotional energy and creativity and create an emotional environment when you have that. So that's my version of Proverbs 14. Yeah, where there's no sound system, the stage is clean. So Justin, you've been leading worship for a long time. More recently, you've been doing some more coaching and turning that skill that you've developed over the last 18 years into advice that you can give for other worship leaders. Tell us more about your Worship Leader Academy and where can people find out more about that?
Yeah, totally. So super dorky of me to figure this out, but 3 years ago, I kind of figured out the numbers of how many hours I'd led worship. And it was over 10,000 hours of doing it full time, 12 plus hours a week for the last 15 years. And so kind of from those hours, I don't say that to like impress anyone, but more to like impress upon them. Like I've seen some amazing mountaintops in worship leading, worked with amazing teams, amazing singers, had amazing sound systems, amazing everything. And I've also experienced some really dark valleys as a worship leader where not so awesome team, not so awesome sound tech, not so awesome a lot of things.
He's not pointing at me.
Not pointing at you. That was like this. It wasn't a. So kind of from those hours, I really began to just feel like I wanted to kind of offer to other worship leaders, like, hey, here's some pitfalls that I found that you can avoid. Here's some joys that you need to double down on and really, really pursue. And so the Worship Leader Academy, it's kind of my flagship program. It's an online mentorship program where it's kind of a 3-part framework that I walk worship leaders through that I've found that have really helped to sustain my heart with Jesus, both on the platform, off the platform, and with leading and discipling humans. With like, I've said this often, like if I was the only one on the worship team, it'd probably be really, really easy, but when you lead other people, there's problems, like sheep bite, at times and things go on. So what really sets the Worship Leader Academy apart though from every other worship leader training out there is the coaching. So not only do you get the 3-part framework of teachings, which is about 50 teachings, but you also get unlimited personal one-on-one access to me for coaching. And so it's access to me, it's not my assistant or some other junior worship leader I'm training. So I'm literally getting in the trenches with people all over the world with their worship teams, with their personal lives with the Lord, and helping to just throw fuel on the fire and keep that fire stoked, if you will. And so that's kind of the basic framework of the Academy.
Awesome. Where can they go to find more information?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, justinrizzo.com/worship academy.
Awesome. Well, big thanks to Justin for coming on the channel. If you have any questions for him, go ahead and type those down in the comments below. I will drop a link to his website and his Worship Leader Academy program down in the description. As always, remember to hit subscribe and don't ding that little bell because these videos aren't so important that I have to interrupt you. So don't ding the bell, but hit subscribe, mash that like button, and we'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.
Typically when James was running sound for me, like I would just get these like moments during the set where I'd be so excited. I'd be like, "Attaway, James."
True story.
True story.